There's a man in America who's making waves about the Middle East. Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump has announced that the Middle East would be safer if the US had not made a mess by attacking Iraq and Libya to remove dictators from office. The billionaire said, "You can make the case if you look at Libya, look at what we did there, it's a mess. If you look at Saddam Hussein with Iraq, look at what we did there, it's a mess." His views seem to be winning support amongst the US public. A new poll by NBC, The Wall Street Journal and Marist still puts Trump significantly ahead of his rivals in the Republican field in the states of Iowa and New Hampshire. Meanwhile, observers continue to condemn the US for the violence and instability that has gripped Iraq, Libya and Syria, where the United States and its allies have been supporting militants operating inside these very countries. Would the US be safer if it had not attacked Iraq and Libya? Should Washington stay out of Syria? And has America been incompetent or simply unwilling to find a robust answer to ISIL? These are the simple questions we sought to answer. Now, US presidential candidate hopeful Donald Trump says the US has made a mess by attacking Iraq and Libya. Is he right? That's the question we put to the American public.
Yes and no. Well, yes, America has caused problems by invading other countries, but that's the 200 years of foreign policy that have been instilled in American culture. So it's very hard, it's a very difficult question to tell.
Yes, I hate to credit Donald Trump, though, but I think we made a mess by attacking Iraq and Libya. I think we make a mess every time we attack somebody, and we're always attacking somebody.
Yes.
I think that the US is often too much out there, and I don't know what else I'd agree with or disagree with, but that one I kind of agree with.
Completely, yeah. The whole region is completely foobar, I would say, yeah.
All of the hustle and bustle that there's been about Donald Trump running for president, he already has a stereotype about himself that anything he does will be wrong. So I think that whatever actions he chooses to take, people will automatically disagree with it.
Yes, he actually is. I think that got us into a lot of trouble. I don't know if he, thinks it through the same way, but yeah, we actually are in a lot of mess. He's right.
I guess that's everyone's opinion. It depends on how you feel about it.
I think that there's a strong argument can be made for that. Yeah, but he's not very consistent about how he criticizes foreign policy in that regard. He said before that we should have kept the oil in Iraq. So, I'm not sure I take his opinion on that.
Is presidential hopeful Donald Trump right to say the US has made a mess by attacking Iraq and Libya? We asked our experts.
Of course, he's correct that the United States has made a mess, particularly with the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. This has led to hundreds of thousands of people losing their lives and perhaps even more. And of course, the crisis in Syria bled over from Iraq. ISIS was really created from the mess of the invasion and the power vacuum and the way the US handled things. And then, of course, Libya is another extension of that. The United States wasn't the most dominant power leading the Libya aggression. The UK and France definitely were a bit more vocal and participatory in that, but as you see, Libya right now is chaos, and it's a breeding ground for people who basically have grievances and they don't know who to blame, and so they attack others.
Well, the thing that's wrong about what Donald Trump is saying is that what you're talking about is a mess, as in this is what we say we're intending to do. America says they don't want war. America says they want democracy. America says they want women's rights in Afghanistan, but they don't really want that in Saudi Arabia now, do they? If you believe what you're being told, then yeah, it's all one big mess. But if you know anything about the real agenda, and I would very much encourage people to look at the Greater Israel Project in particular, all of these wars that are being fought, all of this chaos that is being sowed in the Middle East is actually by design. And if you look at Oded Yanan's strategy for Israel in the 1980s, you'll see that sowing the seeds of sectarian hatred and basically getting the Arabs to bleed each other, which is an actual term that's used, that's actually all quite successful because the long-term goal is for Israel to expand into greater Israel, into Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, and even into parts of Saudi Arabia. And when we see Saudi Arabia and the way it works with Israel, we see how actually the two best allies we have in the region, they're the ones behind all of this. So it's not actually a failure. Donald Trump is speaking in terms of us accepting what we're being told. I don't accept what we're being told at all.
Trump also says that the Middle East would be safer if the US had not attacked Iraq and Libya. What does the American public think?
We should have never, ever gone in. I mean, I think George Bush should not have gone in. And that was such a long time ago. I don't know how we can look at it, the picture now, and see what it would be like if Bush didn't go in.
Again, I'm not a foreign policy expert, so I don't feel equipped to answer that.
I don't think that anyone should be attacking anyone.
I don't know, but I would go generally with that direction of opinion.
I'm not sure about that. You know, come on.
Well, Iraq and Libya are two different countries. But in the case of Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, you at least had stability, and now you don't have any sense of system or structures anymore. It's all just hell. You know?
He's the kind of guy that makes opinion like a boom or like that. If you ask me, they have their own life. U.S. have its own life.
If we had not attacked Iraq, definitely, Libya probably was going to blow up on its own.
Probably, yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah. Okay.
Any particular reason?
Well, usually when Americans are meddling in anything or Canadians are meddling in anything, it's coming from their perspective, which means they're going to cause. It's not usually for the ultimate truism. It's for what you're going to get advantage of.
Well, I'm not entirely sure. There's an argument that's made that because the only time that there's ever been global economic activity and peace in the world has been when there's been somebody who's been able to say, no, if you get out of line, we'll screw with you. You know, like Genghis Khan when he had the Silk Road. So I'm not sure, but we have made a mess of things in some regards. So I'm not sure the individual decisions we've made have been good.
Can our experts offer an objective judgment on whether the Middle East really would be safer without US military action in Libya and Iraq?
I definitely agree that Trump is correct. I agree with very few things that Donald Trump says, but he is correct in the sense that the United States would be safer if we stopped attacking everybody, not just Iraq and Libya, but also the decades of oppression that we led in Latin America, in the Middle East, and the foment that we are creating in Eastern Europe, for example. And so, yes, the world would be safer, not just the United States, if military aggression were decreased.
Well, there's no question that Donald Trump is correct there. I mean, what we've done, look, there was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Never mind the fact that what is Al-Qaeda? Al-Qaeda is a CIA database. These are people that we armed, funded, and trained during the fight against the Soviets. This is not even debatable. It's a matter of public record. And ultimately, Al-Qaeda has always worked as an asset of the CIA. But after we invaded Iraq, proof positive, there was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq before the invasion. Now look at it. Well, all of our best friends and allies are there. Of course, they're supposed to be the enemy. This is what we're told. Al-Qaeda is the enemy. ISIS is the enemy. No, they're not. Saudi Arabia is the primary funder for Al-Qaeda, now ISIS, and whatever they call themselves tomorrow. So how can we be fighting against something when our best friends and allies, Saudi Arabia, that monstrosity of Wahhabi, Salafi, fake Islam, they're the ones that are funding this. Do we punish Saudi Arabia? No, we don't punish them. In fact, the last arms deal with Saudi Arabia between the U.S. and Saudi was for $60 billion. They're using those weapons right now to massacre the poorest people in the Middle East, in Yemen. So we're not fighting terrorism. We are the terrorists, and we use our little proxies to carry out these atrocities, and that justifies the never-ending policies of war.
Donald Trump also says Washington's current approach to the Syrian conflict is a rerun of its failed policies on Iraq and Libya. He claims the outcome will be equally disastrous. Do the public agree? And if so, why?
I think that's a little different because there's civil unrest in Syria. In Iraq, I don't believe there was civil unrest, where it was just they they just didn't like Saddam Hussein and like wanted to go into Iraq. But like Syria is in its own way crying out for the world to help. And so I think it's comparing apples and oranges.
You know, it definitely would be hard for me to answer that, just in the sense of like there was a lot of problems with like with attacking like the other nations and stuff like that. But I definitely wouldn't say that that it's entirely like we haven't learned from these mistakes. And although I think that the approach now is different than it is than as usual. But I can see like the tendency for something similar to happen, but I doubt that, especially because of like from our past, how we've learned that like this is probably not the right way to go. So I'd say that I could see where he's coming from, but I would disagree.
You know, it's so hard for me to give credibility to anything that Trump thinks. So I think that we shouldn't be involved in anything anymore, and that all our money should be going toward students in our school, colleges, our quality of life. And I don't think we can do that unless we get rid of the lobbies. And of course, Trump says that he is not part of a lobby, but his interests are real estate. So he's his own lobby.
Well, there is a slight difference in the sense we were putting boots on the ground then, and now we're just kind of doing bombs. You know, I think the main point is that there's no end game for either of them exactly. So I think that ultimately the result of just like doing a bunch of stuff and then pulling out and not having a ending game plan, yes, will be the same probably.
Well, you know, we're on the outside looking in, and we're not down in Washington. They hear and they know a lot more than we do. So we can't really assume and judge all that business going on, no.
You're catching me. I really don't know. I can't comment on that at all.
So I don't know, and that sounds like a really complicated question that he would even be answering anything to. So my guess would be he's making that up and he's blowing smoke out his ass.
No, they're actually very different approaches. Iraq, we went in with 100,000 troops and we occupied and we stayed there. The problem with Syria is the opposite, where we don't want to get too involved and we sort of want to let it blow up on its own and just try to stay as far away from it as possible. So
things are going to, if it happens once, it's going to happen again and repeat itself.
Are we facing another destabilization and violent repetition of events thanks to Washington's approach to the Syrian conflict? We asked our experts.
I think that Trump's intentions and his motivations for saying this is probably very counter to what I would believe and what I would agree with. He's really catering to a certain part of the Republican Party, well, different factions, those who absolutely hate Obama, people who are racist, people who are Islamophobic, and we know that Trump himself has very hostile attitudes towards Muslims, and we've seen this on the campaign trail, and it's really quite repugnant. And also he's trying to appeal to those libertarians that basically don't want the United States to spend money in other parts of the world, and they want to basically be free to pursue their own business interests inside America and to focus all attention on creating jobs and things like that for American citizens, not necessarily for the poorest, but for the white people who work hardest.
I do actually agree again with Donald Trump, but where I disagree is key, and that is that the stated policy, the U.S. says it doesn't want war. Well, if it doesn't want war, why is it carrying out these insane policies? What is the best recruiting tool for so-called Al-Qaeda or ISIS? It's the atrocities that we in the West are committing. I mean, nothing will engage a so-called terrorist more than their land being invaded, their land being stolen, their families being murdered. I mean, that's a great recruiting tool. And when you don't have any jobs, your country's being destroyed, and the only money comes from Saudi Arabia, who will pay you as a mercenary to carry a gun and go kill people, guess what? That's the option you'll take. All of that is so transparent, it's not even funny. And really, we should recognize the fact that the United States wants never-ending war, and that it's carrying out policies that are specifically catering to Israel. American sons and daughters are dying for Israeli wars. That's the truth of the matter.
Trump has blamed the White House for the emergence of the ISIL terrorists in Iraq, calling them the leftovers that didn't get taken care of. Do the public feel that the US has been incompetent or just unwilling to deal with the ISIL threat?
It's both and it's neither. You know, as a country, yeah, we did make mistakes, but we're not to blame for the actions of others, Yes, as a country, we have made mistakes and our policies have caused a lot of problems to some people, but at the same time, we can't dictate the actions of the individual people who are in specific groups.
From a personal personal standpoint, I think that we could be doing more.
I think they've been incompetent, but as for Afghanistan, I mean, the Russians couldn't handle it, the French couldn't handle it, we can't handle it. I mean, it's a tribe of people that are very territorial. So I don't know what Trump is going to do except have a tantrum and show everybody that it's really his hair. But I don't know. I worry for your generation, the next generation.
We're on the outside looking in. He can say that, but does he really know the whole truth?
I think it's a little bit of both, because our country comes first and our people come first, and everything that it's important that we take care of ourselves first before we go in foreign affairs and anything happening there. So I think it's a combination of both.
I think that's hard for anybody to answer because we don't really know what's going on the inside. I think it's a little unfair of Donald Trump to say that because, the U.S. is just one country. I mean, they're the most powerful country in the world, but they are just one country. And holding them solely responsible for the actions of a handful of people, I think is kind of unfair.
I would say more or less unwilling. Part of that goes back to the Iraq War, that we had such a disaster there that we don't want to become too involved. So we want to try to get the sort of Free Syrian Army on the ground, the Iraqi government to do the work, and we are understandably reticent to commit our own troops and resources to that.
Washington's apparent inability or hesitance to address the ISIL problem is a simple but awkward issue. What is our experts' assessment of what's really going on here?
I think the United States has been incompetent in dealing with ISIL, but I have a real problem with this notion of taking care of humans who are struggling. I think that the way Trump phrases this is quite genocidal, and again, this goes to a question that was posed on his campaign trail recently, where someone asked him when we were going to get rid of the Muslims, and so this reminds me of that kind of Islamophobic, hostile, racist sort of attitude, and Trump is like the epitome of American exceptionalism. The typical white man who thinks that the rules are fair for everyone, but of course the white man's the one who comes on top and he can justify owning millions and exploiting others, thinking that he deserves it because of his goodness or his working hard, when actually the system was completely created to favor him and to exploit and oppress others. So I think I think really Trump here is just really taking a stab at Obama, and he really has no idea what to do in the Middle East.
I completely disagree with the argument that the U.S. is incompetent in terms of its policies being a failure. Again, we have to realize that the stated policies are beyond absurd. If the United States truly wanted women's rights, then why aren't we doing more in Saudi Arabia? Why are we selling weapons to Saudi Arabia if we care about women's rights? If we care about democracy, why are we supporting Israel, the Jewish supremacist state, which does not afford the same rights to non-Jews at all? In fact, Palestinians who come from Palestine can't even go back to their homeland because they're not Jewish. We don't care about democracy. We don't care about women's rights. Our policies are very much geared towards never-ending war. So in this sense, America's been quite successful. Look at the entire region. It is on fire, and it is a direct result of U.S. policy. But it's not an accident. That's very much the intention. And once again, the real agenda here is for greater Israel. So American sons and daughters are fighting wars for Israel.
Would you trust Trump to take care of the Middle East? And if not, why not? Here's what the public said.
Absolutely not. He knows nothing about politics. He's a lot of money and influences people in which way, I'm not sure.
I wouldn't trust Trump to take care of anything. I mean, he's a man that he's like Khrushchev, throwing tantrums. he is not grounded enough.
I don't think he's capable. You know, he's a great businessman, but I think that's as far as he should go. He should concentrate on his own doings and not our country.
I would say no, because although Trump is a great businessman, he doesn't really know anything about politics. If you look at his website, the only platform he has right now is immigration, which kind of sounded like an impromptu, extemporaneous speech, like when someone brought up the topic. But he doesn't really know anything about the politics within the United States.
I have no idea whether I trust Donald Trump for anything. I don't know about his experience with these kinds of matters. He would have plenty of advisors, I'm sure. I don't know if he takes advice well. Probably not, I'm guessing. So we'll have to see if he ever gets to that point where he's making the decisions.
Absolutely not. He hasn't even formulated a foreign policy, so he's a joke. You wouldn't trust him at all. Yeah.
No, I mean, the guy can't even take care of his hair. How is he going to take care of a country or any of the politics? And honestly, if half those things came out of his mouth, I can't even get my head around those questions, so I'm going to guess that he's just making that stuff up, like most of the stuff he's made up.
No. Absolutely not, because I don't trust him on anything.
Oh God, no. I mean, he's kind of a guy who basically what he does wrong is what, if we did something wrong, what we did wrong, which is just throw a bunch of stuff at it and then expect something's gonna stick. So no, I wouldn't trust him for that.
I don't think so. I don't really think so, since it has its own opinion about economical issues, and I don't really think he's gonna take care of it.
Absolutely not.
And why?
Because he is strident and has no foreign policy expertise, and yeah, that's basically it.
Do our experts trust Donald Trump's ability to handle issues relating to the Middle East competently? Here's what they said.
I wouldn't trust Donald Trump to do much of anything, personally. It's quite shocking that he's been so successful in his campaign thus far, but he appeals to a certain kind of American who's frustrated, and many Americans do have legitimate grievances from all across the country and all across the political and cultural and class spectrum. But Donald Trump is not even familiar with the religious diversity, with the cultural diversity, the linguistic diversity. He doesn't appreciate other people's, other cultures' accomplishments. He's very much an American exceptionalist. And so I don't see him having any respect for the region. And without respecting each other, there's no way that we can come to terms with living with each other in this world. And so I wouldn't trust him at all to do anything in the Middle East positive.
Well, I lose respect for anybody who fails to see the obvious. Now, Donald Trump is probably the best option in a pool of horrible options. I mean, look at the other ones. We've got Hillary Clinton, a patent psychopath. This woman is just a criminal on steroids, quite frankly. And then we've got Jeb Bush, part of the whole Bush dynasty. I mean, another Bush, really? Why not just make a king and queen of the United States and let it be a hereditary thing? So, it seems as if Donald Trump is about the best option out there, and some of what he says is actually true, but he still seems to be either stupid or unwilling to acknowledge some very important facts, such as, for instance, Americans are fighting wars for Israel. If he said that, I would have a little bit more respect for him, but apparently he's either a little bit ignorant or he's just not going to speak the truth.
The US has made such a mess in Iraq and Libya that even an ultra-capitalist Republican presidential hopeful has admitted the country's destructive foreign policies. Donald Trump can see what's gone wrong with American foreign policy in the Middle East. It is little short of staggering that nobody else on Capitol Hill seems able to admit what Trump and the rest of the world already know, that America has messed up in Libya and Iraq and is on the verge of doing it all over again, this time in Syria.